Hey budget gardeners, Vita Loca here. Join me today as I give you an end of June garden tour. So let's go. Today is June 24th and I wanted to give you a tour of my garden. I live in New Hampshire, zone 5B, and there are a lot of beautiful things happening in the yard right now. I won't be putting plant names on the screen. However, if you have any questions about any plants that you see, please feel free to drop it down in the comment section below and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have. So let's get started with the tour. Last year, we went into this flower bed and we divided a whole bunch of hosta just to fill in some areas, fill in some gaps. We took hosta that I already had and we divided them down and moved them around in this bed. And irrigation was also added to this bed at that time. Did you know that when you have a large size hosta, it will never reach its potential size if you don't give it the right amount of water? And hosta do need a lot of water. And that's why I'm so glad that we added the drip irrigation in this bed. I see a huge difference this year with my hosta plants. They look so happy. Many of the plants that you're going to see in my garden were plants that I bought on clearance or on sale, or that I received from a family member or friend, or got it from a yard sale. Maybe a small piece, but then I just divided and moved it around the yard. Since I have a lot of trees in my yard, I try to use that vertical interest. And you can see that I placed hanging baskets on trees leading down this way. They're hanging baskets that I only had to pay one time. And then for the inserts, the cocoa liners, I replace those every 2 to 3 years. And when it comes to the plants, they're typically perennials from my yard or annuals that I started from seed. So you can see here I have Lamium, and that's a perennial. I have lots of Impatiens that I started from seed. There's Creeping Jenny and Lissum. Now, I just planted these over the last few days, so they still need some time to take off. But they have potential, and I'll be showing you in future videos how lovely they're looking as time goes on. But if you have perennials in your yard that can act as a trailer, I say go ahead and use them. Lamium is a great one to add. It's very pretty. And the Creeping Jenny, given the right conditions, can also blossom for you. At the base of many of my trees, I've put hosta or some other plant. And these two trees have had hosta around them for a few years. But then last year I divided those hosta and I added some more around the base of this tree as well as the base of this tree. So it's going to take a little bit of time, but these will eventually fill in as well. This plant is called Foamflower. It's a type of Tiarella, and it has a very pretty white blossom to it. And it's just starting to go by. But it's also known just for its beautiful foliage. So after the blossoms do go by, I'll be coming in and cutting them back, and then I'll just enjoy the beautiful foliage or the leaves. Right behind this Foamflower is a happy surprise. Honestly, I don't remember buying it. I don't remember planting it. It's called Feverfew, and I just think it looks so dainty and it's very happy in this location. So you better believe I'll be collecting the seeds of it so I can have more plants like this. Mr. Budget Gardener was so kind. He weeded the front part of this flower bed for me, and then he added some annuals, begonias that I started from seed, and it just looks so much better now. I just need to come in and finish the weeding job in this bed. So you can just see this area here needs to be weeded, as well as areas towards the back of the bed. But that's okay. I'm definitely going to tackle that. I'm motivated now that he did this part over here. There are some very pretty coral bells or Heuchera that we added in this bed last year. And I want to come in and divide them Even if they're small, it's okay. I want to turn one plant into two or two plants into four, because every time you divide your plants, they're just going to keep on giving more plants for you. I love the Japanese painted fern. I started with one small piece, and last year I divided it. So now I have three small pieces. Just a quick update on this garden space. I did work on it yesterday, and I wanted to add it as part of this video because I think it looks so pretty. I just added some Impatiens that I had started from seed, and I moved around some perennials in here. And I divided some of the perennials, and I think it looks really nice. I think it really pops. And then I also added some mulch after weeding this little spot. Doesn't it look so pretty? One of the perennials that I forgot to mention that's in this spot is Epimedium. It's right here, and I did divide it into smaller pieces. So I have three pieces of it now. You can see one over here as well, and one down the way a little bit. I love Pulmonaria or Lungwort. It's so pretty with the spots on its leaves. Did you know that it had a very pretty blossom in the early spring months? They were a pink and purple colored flower. And as much as I love the blooms on it, I love the leaves just as much. This plant right here is called Lenten Rose, and it is awfully pretty. It blooms for the longest time. And last year I was able to divide this as well. So I have one piece here, and then I have another piece right over in there. Another name for a Lenten rose is Hellebrore. And right behind the Hellebrore is a Ligularia. I'm pretty sure the other name for it is bottle rocket, but it has a very, very striking, very pretty yellow bloom to it. And you can see that it's budded up. And when it blooms, the bees absolutely love it. And what I love about it is that it's also a very tall plant, and it thrives in a shady condition. Right near the Ligularia is a plant that's fairly new to me, and it's called Goat's Beard. I bought this a couple of years ago from a backyard plant nursery, and I just bought one plant and I divided it over here, and then I also divided a few more pieces going this way. I feel like any plant that has a nice bloom like that and also thrives in the shade is a plant that you need to have in a shade garden. Remember how I mentioned Hosta love water? Well, so do Astilbe. And I have some really pretty Astilbe that's budded up right now. At the base of this tree is such a sweet, such a cute Labrador Violet. And I love that it basically tucked itself into this tree. I did not plant it here. And I just think it's very cute. It did have a nice bloom to it earlier in the season. I have a lot of different size hosta in my yard, and this is more of a bluish colored hosta. And I'm almost sure it's called blue mouse ears. But regardless, you can see the little blossom on it. It will bloom, which is very sweet. This hosta right here, I would say is one of my favorite. I know it's small, but I just love the chartreuse green color on it, and that it even has a dark green margin to it. As we leave the hosta garden and head towards my backyard, one thing that I will tell you is the deer have attacked some of my hosta, and they haven't touched any of these. But once you leave that section there and you head this way, they definitely have started to munch on my hosta. And at this point, I have decided I am going to move the hosta. It's too much of a battle for me to spray hosta. You can imagine if I was to plant hosta all the way around my backyard, it's just not worth it for me. So I will be coming in over time and I will be digging up the hosta leading up to the main hosta garden, where they don't seem to touch that hosta. And I think part of the reason is that main hosta bed is right next to a structure, which is my barn. And so I think the deer just don't care to go that close to the barn. And that's okay. Instead, what I'll be doing is I'll be replacing the hosta with other shade-loving plants. There are so many beautiful shade-loving plants out there. And I have plenty in my yard that I can divide and move. I have a pattern when it comes to the plants that I put in this bed last year. So this is a betony. It's a Stachys humelo variety. And a few of them are blooming, many of them are not. And that's just because they got divided last year. There's more of the Foamflower. This pretty plant right here, that is a type of coral bells. We have hosta that will eventually get dug out. Some more Heuchera. There's more Lungwort. Towards the back is more goat's beard, but towards the front, that's actually a white Astilbe. They look similar, but they are different plants. I think this angle is very pretty because you see the white Foamflower in bloom. You have the pink of the coral bell, and then right nearby, that purple color, that's the betony or Stachys. Some people call it a wood betony. And this is where the deer have started to nibble. They think it's a buffet for them. And you can see over here, this is where I need to continue weeding and mulching. I did plant some peonies towards the back of this bed, but it's not the best placement for them, even though a few of them did bloom. They need to get moved, so I will move those on a different date. The deer came and they took down those hosta. They don't seem to chew on these little ones for whatever reason. Towards the front of this bed are begonias that I started from seed. They're going to take off. They were just planted this weekend. Last year, Mr. Budget Gardener and I added drip irrigation into this bed, and we basically have 3 lines of drip irrigation. The pattern of plants pretty much repeats itself throughout this bed. But as we turn around and head in this direction, the pattern changes just slightly. I love this green pistachio colored Heuchera, and you can see that I have it in a couple of more places. I'm definitely going to be packing this bed with more perennials, a lot more different types of Heuchera, because I have Heuchera in other areas of my garden that I can divide and move into here. And I think that that would be a great replacement for all the hosta that I'll be digging out. Since I had room in this bed, we also added some of the coleus that I started from seed. And those are by Baker Creek, and they're called Clocha Rose. And they were seeds that I collected last year from my plants that I had. I just love Astilbe. I just think it's so cute, very dainty. And right near that plant, I have a Hakonechloa grass. And I just planted those last year. I had one plant and I divided it. So I have one over here. And as we move this way in the bed, I have another one tucked in right over there. And as much as I love dividing plants, I won't be dividing my Hakonechloa grass this year. It needs to put on some size. As we move this way towards the backyard, we have a rock wall. Now the rock wall gets washed out every year, it seems, and so it needed some work. So Mr. Budget Gardener added more soil to the top because it had receded down. And after adding the soil and weeding, he then added some more annuals that I started from seed, and then he mulched and edged this area, and it looks so much better. In front of the wax begonias that I had started from seed are creeping phlox, and the creeping phlox has already gone by. And at the base of the rock wall is a type of sedum, and it looks really pretty right now. It has a nice yellow star shape to it. I love the blossoms. In fact, I have another bluish colored sedum in this bed as well. When we move in this direction here, I wanted to show you I have a large stash of plants. They were healed into my vegetable garden over the winter months, and in future videos, I think we're going to tackle some of those plants and just get them planted because they need to come out of their containers. And then as we turn this way, there is opportunity from here all the way around. Now, when I say opportunity, I have planted plants in those areas, but I haven't taken care of them. So I'm not going to show them to you today, but I will show them to you on a different day. Maybe we'll do them as projects together, or maybe I'll do them as a project by myself and then just give you an update of a before and after. Over here is a raised vegetable garden, and it gets some sun, but it doesn't get full sun. I'm going to show you what's in there. Right here are cucumbers. They actually usually do very well here. We just need to add a trellis. We did have a trellis, but it fell apart. So we'll be adding a trellis very soon. And as we come this way, there are onions that I had started from seed towards the front of the bed. And then right behind the onions are green beans, bush variety of green beans. And we succession planted another row of green beans right here. And we try to do that every few weeks. So in another few weeks, we'll add another row of green beans over in here. And well, you probably noticed this. This is asparagus. Now, optimally, when it comes to a raised vegetable garden or even a raised flower garden, you want to make sure that it's not too big. There's a certain size that is recommended. Well, I can tell you that when we made this bed, it was made too big, which means we have to walk inside of the bed to weed, to harvest. So at some point, we will be redoing this vegetable garden bed, and we'll make sure that it's appropriately sized. And a big reason for doing this bed over again is because the wood on the outside is starting to fall apart. So it's a good time to make the bed the right size. On this side of the bed are brassicas, and these are brassicas that I had started from seed. We have cabbage over here. There's broccoli, which now that I'm doing this tour, I'm seeing that I need to harvest it. That's so exciting. It's looking good. And the more you harvest your broccoli, the more broccoli you'll get, even if it's just small little pieces. And this is a type of cauliflower. It's a purple color cauliflower. And look how pretty it is. I did have insect netting on my brassicas. However, I did have to remove it because it wasn't tall enough, and it appears after removing it, the insects have found my Brussels sprouts. So that's okay. I'm just going to have to spray them with BT because I don't want them to take down my whole entire plant. And I want to be able to enjoy some of my brassicas here, especially the Brussels sprouts. On the back side here, this was lettuce, as well as Swiss chard and some spinach. And that needs to be removed at this time. And then over here are peas. And you can see that the peas have started and will be ready for picking in about one more week, I'd say. As we leave the vegetable garden, close by to it is what I call my rose garden. And the rose garden is not looking the way that I want it to look. And I'm going to explain why. Well, let's ignore the annuals that's self-seeded in here because that's not a bad thing. I'm planning to dig these out. They're called Bidens. They're a yellow colored annual, and I'll be moving them somewhere else in my yard. And the roses themselves look okay, but they definitely are being attacked by some sort of insect. So I need to treat the roses. And honestly, I've never had a major issue when it comes to insect pressure on my roses. But that's all right. You know, sometimes we just have to do these things. But the thing that I'm not enjoying in my rose garden the most is in the center. I have a couple of perennials that I put in here last year. And they're very tall, they're very leggy. They are the Shasta Daisy. I love Shasta Daisy, but they just seem to get very leggy, at least this variety. I think the Chelsea chop would help with the plant, but I'm not sure. I might try that. I might try to do the Chelsea chop, but I'm guessing that I'm probably going to be digging these out. And I think for next year, for my rose garden, what I'm going to do is I want to have an annual in the center. I did that before and I really loved it. I put the purple colored salvia in the center and it just looked so pretty. So I think I'm going to give that a try for next year. But amongst some of this weedy mess, there is beauty. These are a drift rose. And this rose here is also a drift rose. I typically just buy my roses from Home Depot or Lowe's because the price is right and I'm just looking for color. Nothing too fancy, just something pretty. And then this rose here, this is a knockout rose. I got these from my mother-in-law's and I have quite a few of these in this bed. They're very pretty. So I'll be coming in here and just doing general maintenance. I'll be pulling out any of the perennials that are in the center of the bed, which are the Shasta Daisies as well as some yellow coreopsis. I'm going to deadhead all of my roses and then I'm just going to apply something to get rid of the bugs. And I'll have to research that because I never have had to put anything on my roses. I'll have to see if I have to use some sort of insecticidal soap or something else. Amongst this weedy bed is some really pretty things. And I've shown you this bed before. This will be a bed that over time I will tackle and work on. But what's blooming in here right now are the ditch lilies. I'm planning to dig these out and I'm going to put them down near my driveway, near the road, because I think they'll look pretty down there. And that area does get more sun, so they'll be happier. Down in this bed, there are a ton of peonies, and they have already gone by. But again, this bed was meant to be a temporary holding area. So over time, I do plan to come in here and go shopping and move plants out of this bed. There are a lot of very pretty daylilies that can get moved to sunnier locations of my yard. As we head towards the front of my house, towards the front of this bed, there are a lot of different types of Heuchera or coral bells. And over time, I'm planning to go shopping in this area and take from this area because these coral bells look pretty here, but these beds do need to get weeded. There's a lot of work to be done in a lot of places in my yard. So I'd rather take from this area and fill in the areas that have been weeded. And then as I take plants out of certain areas, I can then tackle those areas and weed around it. At the base of this tree is a beautiful plant. It's more of a woodland plant, and it's called wild ginger. And then right near it, I'm very pleased with how this area came out. I just used two kinds of hosta, and you can see that I mixed and matched them. So you have like the darker colored hosta with the lighter green colored hosta. And I just think that looks really pretty. And for whatever reason, the deer so far don't seem to nibble on the hosta in this area. And then at the base, towards the back here again, is more of the wild ginger. And it just goes around the tree. And I'd love to see that ginger go all the way around the tree over time. We're heading towards the front still. And it's morning right now, but I can tell you that much of my yard is shady. So I try to be creative as much as I can when it comes to a shady woodland type of garden and finding plants that will thrive and do well. And I can tell you one of the plants that does really well is this fringe-leafed bleeding heart. So since it does so well, I'm planning to divide and move that around in my yard, especially in the areas where there is a lot of deer pressure, because they don't seem to bother with this plant. And another plant that I'm planning to divide and move around is this plant right here, which I do have quite a bit of it on this side of my house. And this is called Jacob's Ladder. And that looked really pretty in the early spring months. You know, I'm always learning as a gardener. It doesn't matter if I've been gardening for 30 years. This plant right here is called Baptisia, or false indigo. And it needs to get moved. It needs full sun. It will never bloom in this location. There's just not enough sun over here. That's all right. Isn't that how we learn as gardeners? But at the base of the Baptisia is another Hellebrore. And it's looking really pretty, even if the blossoms have starting to go by. So as we make our way towards the front of my yard, you'll see the daylilies, and they are the Stelladoro daylilies. They are all in their glory right now. I love that I have this color. I think it's so nice because I need color right now this time of year in my yard. And so the Stelladoro daylilies are definitely providing me with that color. And as I do this tour, I will tell you, and you can see, that I still need to come in and weed a lot of my flower beds. But that's okay. Over here are some really pretty lamb's ear. And I want more lamb's ear in my yard. I really love lamb's ear. So I'm planning to divide that pretty much every single year because it is a vigorous grower. And so why not keep dividing it? Another plant that just does not do well, at least in this area, is creeping phlox. And that's what's over here. So I plan on digging up the creeping phlox from this flower bed because it really needs a lot more sun than it's ever going to get in this bed. And there are a lot of people that want creeping phlox as part of my backyard plant nursery. So I'll be digging it up and I'll definitely be offering it for sale. I love creeping phlox. I just don't have a lot of areas that have full sun in my yard. See, you can see it's all along the frontier. It's where basically the lawn ends, and then there's patches of the creeping phlox. So as we continue going in this direction, we're heading towards what I call the lilac bed. And it's a very large semicircle shaped bed. And there you go, a lot more Stelladoro daylily. Now this bed has a bunch of things in it. Things that I like, things that need to get moved. There is more creeping phlox, and it didn't put on a great show this year. But then again, I only planted it here last year. So I'm going to give it one more year in this bed. And then there's also lamium in this bed. The bed just needs to get weeded and edged, and I think it'll look a lot tidier. In this bed, there's also, over here, a yellow colored perennial mum. And you really want to cut back your mums, your perennial mums, so that they're not leggy. And you want to do it well before July 4th, which means I need to do it within the next week. So I'll be tackling that, and I'm going to attempt to take my cuttings and try to root them. And behind the Stelladoro daylilies are iris. And those iris did not do that great in this bed in the early spring months. So I will most likely be digging them up and potting them up to then put somewhere else in my yard. I have some yucca plants, and they're a funny type of plant, but they do have a neat blossom to them. And if they bloom, which they have bloomed in the past, so if they bloom this year, I'll be sure to show you what the bloom looks like. And now we're heading basically towards my driveway, which goes up like this. And I have a patch of hosta here. The deer have not found it yet, but I know last year they nibbled on the hosta down here. So I am planning to dig up these hosta. And what I'd like to do is actually, I'd like to put some perennial geranium in this area. See those really pretty yellow blooms? They're so dainty, they're fairy-like, and the plant is called Lady's Mantle. I'm planning on dividing and moving that all around my yard because it does really well in the shade, and it's very pretty towards the front of a flower bed. This year has been a good year for my backyard plant nursery. I'm on year 2, and I am overdue for making a video on how I did this year with my nursery and lessons learned. That video hopefully should be coming out within the next week or so. But I wanted to show you a few pretty things that are blooming in here right now. There's some very pretty Dianthus. I love that plant because you can just keep cutting it back and it'll bloom for you throughout the summer. Surprisingly, I don't have Rose Campion anywhere in my yard in terms of my garden beds. So I need to snag one of these plants and put them somewhere in my yard where it's full sun because it's really pretty. And look at it next to the Shasta Daisy. Nice pop of pink color. Hiding in here is a Sweet William, looking very sweet. There's a pretty shorter variety of a purple Monarda. And these are actually down here just as a holding area for myself. I got these plants from my sister-in-law. She was kind enough to divide them for me. They're very pretty. I can't wait to put them somewhere in my yard. Here's a very pretty Coreopsis. Here's one lonely beard's tongue or Penstemon. Even though this is not blooming anymore, someone that pointed this out when they were here for my backyard plant nursery, that the seed heads on my Clematis, how pretty they look. They have almost a golden sheen to them. I planted some wax begonias as well as vinca that I started from seed down in this little spot up along my driveway on the right. Here on the south side of my house, I'm noticing that there's a lull. And there are a lot of perennials in this bed, but they are budded up and they're not blooming right now. The only thing that's blooming is really just the Stella d'Oro daylilies. But definitely my purple cone flower or Echinacea are all budded up, so they'll be blooming before you know it. It's been a busy year with a lot going on, and there is beauty if you look for it. There's a very pretty Clematis, and I really need to get this staked up, put on a trellis. You can see it's budded up. And that's all right. I'm viewing this year as tackling one bed at a time. And my goal is for next year to have the beds looking the way I want them to look. The big thing is there is potential in these gardens. They just need a little bit of TLC. You can see there's another Clematis peeking through. And there's a big grouping of red-colored bee balm over here. And that's going to look very striking when it's blooming. We have some hydrangeas here. And this one right here is not budded up yet. But when you look right next to it, there are two big ones that are blooming or just starting to bloom. And they're looking very pretty. In this direction, as we get closer to the front of my house, you can see that there's some really pretty purple color at the bottom. And that purplish pink colored flower is the Cranesbill Geranium. I've been trying to be vigilant about deadheading it, but I tell you, it's a lot of work to come out here and deadhead this. I feel like I'm constantly deadheading it. But I do want it to bloom all season long. So I'm going to keep deadheading it for as long as I can, because I just think it adds a really nice pop of color to this bed. And especially right now with the Stelladoro Daylilies blooming, I feel like the geranium just gives it a really nice contrast with the two colors. So this is what I call the bay window bed, and that's because there's a bay window right there. And last year, we packed a lot of perennials in this bed. We didn't buy any of the perennials. We just went shopping down in my plant nursery that I have, and we just brought in plants from there, and then we took plants that were already in here and divided them, moved them around. So you can see that it's pretty packed in here. Now, one thing to keep in mind is my septic tank is right in here. So I can probably put some pots there, but I won't be planting any perennials in that area. As we head to my front door, you can see I have a nice pond, which is a wonderful little water feature. We added that a number of years ago. And around it are a bunch of begonias or annuals that I had started from seed. There are also some vinca that I started from seed. And then you can see the beautiful miniature, small size hosta. And they really are meant to be small. And yet you'll notice that they also send up some blooms. So they are budded up and they're going to be blooming very soon. And then as we head this way, there's a pot that we put together in a previous video. And it was just using plants that I already had on hand. There's this beautiful Lismachia. And I got a piece of it last year in a container pot. And I took cuttings of it. And then I overwintered it in my garage because honestly, I wasn't sure if it would overwinter outside in the landscape. I just think it's so pretty. I love its trailing habit. And then as we move up into the pot, there are a bunch of impatiens that I started from seed. And this was my experiment, was to collect the seeds from my tuberous begonia and see if I could produce a plant from it, which I produced a whole bunch of plants from seed. So look how pretty the tuberous begonia is looking. Did you know that you could start tuberous begonias from seeds that you collected? Well, you can. And then right nearby are two window boxes. And I tried to use similar plants to follow the same pattern. So you can see we have the Lismachia and Impatiens. And they're still filling in because they were just added a few weeks ago. I call this my pansy nursery because these are pansies that have been here for a few years. They just drop their seeds and come back year after year. And they are looking very leggy. They really need to be cut back, in fact. But Mr. Budget Gardener doesn't want me to cut them back. He said, there's color in here. Why would you cut them back? But pretty soon I am going to cut them back because they're just super leggy right now. But yes, they do add color in this bed. And we do need color right now in this bed, at least until the dahlias that I just planted the other day take off. And they're dahlias that I started from seed a few years ago, and then the plants produced tubers, and now we're just waiting for the plants to take off. And at the base of these pots are lobelia that I started from seed. Up along the walkway are plants that I started from seed and they were just planted recently. And I cut them back because I wanted to give them a nice chance to bush out. They were looking very leggy in their 6 cell packs. So up along the front are Alyssum and Lobelia. And you wait, in another month, this area is going to look gorgeous, I can assure you. And then over here are plants that I started from seed as well. And those are alternating color of pink and white vinca. And then we have more pots in here with dahlias again, as well as lobelia at the base. Also in this bed are a bunch of coreopsis, and that's a perennial. But I will show you some of the dahlia are blooming, and they are very pretty. They just need to fill out more in these pots. This one here also looks very pretty. Here on the south side, there's a bit of a lull in this flower bed, and I'm taking note of that. I'm trying to see what else I should add to this bed to make sure that there's color in here at all times. At the very bottom here, towards the front of the bed, those flowers are just starting to go by, and those are Dianthus. And I showed you in a previous video the process for cutting back your Dianthus. Now, I have not come in and done that to all my plants. I plan on doing that over the next week. I only did it to this Dianthus here, and you can see how much cleaner this one looks compared to the one next to it. And then also, all of these Dianthus need to be cut back. And the one that we cut back in that previous video is this one over here. So you can see it just looks a little bit tidier, a little bit cleaner. But there are plants that are going to bloom. They're just late blooming plants. So over here is Joe Pieweed. That's a tall phlox right over there. And this is a purple colored mum. I also need to come in here. I need to cut back that mum, and I'm going to try to take cuttings off of that mum as well. And in regards to the purple mum, if we move this way, there's another purple mum right over there. Over here is a globe thistle. It's going to be a very pretty blue colored flower, and it's just barely starting to bud up. The yellow flowers that you see, those are a type of Echinacea. I'm almost positive they're the prairie Echinacea, but if I'm wrong, I'll put the right name up on the screen. When it comes to this flower bed, I really struggle with it. It's one of my only full sun flower beds. Granted, I know that it's not sunny here right now, but it's typically what I would call full sun. And in this flower bed, I'm very happy with basically the front of the flower bed. I like that look, but I still need to come up with an idea of what else I want to do in this bed. And I have plants that have seeded themselves in here that I'm not happy with, and I know I need to remove them. And one of them is right over here. It's a very pretty plant. It's called sea holly. And you can see when you move in closer that they are all budded up. And it's going to be a gorgeous blue colored flower. However, I don't need that many. And if you look at the base here, you'll see what I'm talking about. And it's because it self-seeded itself all around that rock, going all the way down this way. And the same is true for Baptisia that's in here. That self-seeded itself, and that's huge. So unfortunately, both of these type of plants have a very large taproot system to them. So I will have to come in here and tackle that on a different day, probably in the late summer, early fall months. We had put together a couple of pots near my side porch here, and this was one of them. And actually, I'm very pleased with how it's looking. Again, towards the front, you can see we have the Lismachia and also a creeping Jenny. And we have creeping Jenny on the other side as well. And there's a wax begonia that I started from seed. And also the coleus, Colocha rose. And those were started from seed as well. And they look very happy in here. As well as the lobelia, the white color lobelia that I started from seed. We have Lismachia on the back side here. And then we have Dusty Miller. And Dusty Miller was a freebie, It was a plant from last year that I started from seed and then I overwintered in my garage. I just think that this pot came out very nice. And over here is the second pot on the other side of the porch. And that looks equally as sweet. Here on the side porch are 2 window boxes. And we also put these together. And they're looking a little sparse because the chipmunks have been coming in and they've been taking whatever plants they want. But overall, the plants look okay. I just need to come in here and maybe add a few more plants just to replace whatever the chipmunks have taken out. I see you, little friend. This is the flower bed that I call the old arborvitae bed because we used to have arborvitae in this bed. We removed them, we added irrigation, and then we just added some perennials towards the center of the bed and then annuals towards the outer part of the bed. And they are slowly starting to take off. There's coleus, there's blue lobelia, we have alyssum, there's vinca, and those are the annuals that were added. And then the perennials towards the center, those are rhododendrons. There's also a juga in here, as well as some candy tuft. And we can't forget, there are some blue pansies in here as well. But I'm trying to be patient. I think this bed will take off because I remember last year it looked so pretty. Now I do have some lupin that I'm letting go to seed because I want to collect the seeds off of that. And at the base over here, there are a bunch of freebie plants, and those are calendula. And I am planning to add more annuals in this area here. There are some freebie cosmos, one over here and some tucked in over there. And then right near that cosmos, there are some lilies there, and you can see that they're budded up. I just wanted to share this angle of my front yard. This is looking out from my daughter's window. And you can see just how pretty everything's looking. Trying to fill in all those spaces in the front yard. Here we are upstairs off my bedroom balcony. And this is basically my backyard. And it's the east side of my house. And you can see there's the Hosta garden. We have the rock wall. The rose garden. And the raised vegetable garden. And there you have it. That's my tour of my garden for the end of June. And I really wanted to make this video because I wanted to show you a lot of the beauty that's happening in the yard. And I also wanted to show you or share with you that there is also a lot that still needs to be done. And the reality is it all won't be done by the end of this year. And that is okay. I think that's true for a lot of us in our gardens. And we just have to embrace the beauty that is within our garden and take it one day at a time. I really enjoy being in my garden. I always tell everyone it's therapy for my soul, and it really is. And I love that I can share my garden space with all of you. If you have any questions or comments, I'd love to hear from you. And until the next video, make it a great day with gardening.